Welcome to Indigenous Coffee Talks, a place for live conversations with interesting people from all over the world. And what they have in common is their passion for Jesus and a great story about sharing the good news in the digital space.
In each episode of Coffee Talks, we introduce you to someone who is passionate about using their digital footprint to help bring the gospel to where it needs to go. Through these conversations, we want you to catch a story, grab an idea, and go do something. Well, welcome again to Coffee Talks. In today's episode, we are joined by Matthew Velasquez, a brother from Philippines who started a discipleship podcast about 4 years ago. And without him realizing, the podcast has reached 35 countries. And he'll tell you that this is truly a work of God.
That's right. So I first met Matthew, or whom I call Kuya Matt, here in the Philippines in one of our digital outreach events. Later on, I started to listen to their podcasts and became a fan as well. So if you are thinking of starting your own podcast or even thinking about using it to be able to reach out to others, stay with us, listen with us, and he'll share more about how they are doing it. So hello, let's welcome to Indigenous Coffee Talks, Matthew from Grow Deep Podcast. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Hey, Jonah and Simon. Thank you for inviting me, and
Hi
I'm so
there,
excited
welcome.
to also be here in the Coffee Talks.
So now you're in a coffee shop, right? And
You're
also
literally in a
having
coffee
fun.
house.
That's right. I'm enjoying coffee here at Pasay in the Philippines, and I'm happy to be here. Excited.
Yeah.
That's great. So, yeah, we're excited to know more and listen to your story. So, tell us what you do, how you arrived at podcasting, specifically Grow Deep Podcast.
Oh, the podcast when it started, it really wasn't even a podcast in my mind, because I had just left my job as a youth pastor back then, and I was working in a national office of the evangelicals in the Philippines, and I kind of missed sharing ideas from the Word, and I just started posting 5-minute devotionals online on my Facebook account. And when my friends noticed that I was doing it regularly, one of them reached out to me and told me, Kuya Matt, why don't you start a podcast? And I was like, what's a podcast? And, I was so surprised because I didn't even know what a podcast was. So he told me about it. He told me about a platform. And I studied that platform, I think, for a week because I didn't really know how it works. So um, that's basically where it started. It started from, I think, just a desire to speak truth and just share the word of God to people. And little did I know that there were a lot of people who were looking for that kind of content online. And so, just like what Simon said, when I started this podcast, I couldn't even imagine where we are today, and it's all by God's grace that we're able to reach thousands and thousands of people on a regular basis, and some of them we don't even know where they are. So, if you're a listener of the podcast, thank you for supporting us, and it's all by God's grace. Yeah.
Where did you get the name Grow Deep, if I may ask?
Grow Deep has always been an idea inside my head because more and more during our time, people, especially in the Philippine context, many people know about the gospel and God, but the desire to deepen their understanding of that um, is not so much evident in a lot of people. So maybe you could say you know about God, but it's more important that you know God personally. And so that was kind of a heralding call. The podcast name, Grow Deep, is a kind of heralding call. You don't just know about God, you gotta know God personally. And what you know about God, you can use in order for you to stand on a solid foundation in life. And so it started off actually as an app name for an app I was trying to develop in 2017, 2018. And it was a Bible reading app, but it didn't really it flopped. That's the term. The app flopped, and they discontinued that app because not so many people were using that app. But nevertheless, you know how God works. God knows what's best. And eventually, when I started podcasting
Mhm.
and I wanted it to be named something, I decided that it would be named Grow Deep. You know, it came from the verse that says, "You should be rooted and established firmly in the faith," and that's exactly the heart of the show that we're trying to produce every week.
So far as you're doing your podcast, what is it about the podcast format that you found that it really resonates with people? Because you already reached out to 35, reaching 35 countries already and have followers and listeners. So,
Absolutely. I
what are
mean,
your learnings?
when I first got our Spotify stats, I think that was 2019. I was so surprised to see so many countries reached by the podcast, and um, I realized that it's not just something that you can do for a hobby, especially if you're intentionally Christian. Um, I think podcasting nowadays, especially, is a very, very interesting and effective platform for those people who are looking for not just entertainment, but also meaning, you know. Because in a postmodern
Mhm.
world where people are very, very relativistic in their values and morals, a very solid voice when it comes to character and convictions really resonates a lot. And we do, especially our generation, we love new experiences, right? And so we go after these experiences, like, hey, I want to try this, I want to do this, I want to see if it works for me, stuff like that. We're very like that. But I think we have to go further and really realize, what does it mean for me to experience this? What does it mean for me that I'm looking for happiness in experiences, but I'm not really finding it?
Mm.
And so we just wanted to speak into that reality. And I realized, as a content creator, a wannabe content creator way back when, you know, um, that the video, the video medium of content creation is too bombarded by image, right? I feel like
Mm.
it's a tough competition when you have all these YouTubers editing their videos with all of the effects and all of stuff like that. And um, I wanted to speak into people who were maybe uh, alone at night or maybe in the day, realizing that they just want sense in their life. And you'd be surprised
Mm.
how many people there are. And actually, I believe that every person will come across that moment in their life where they just need to sit down and ask themselves, what is the sense of all this? And that's where
Mm.
podcasting comes in, because you're not really looking to see anything interesting. You just want to hear a message, and you want to hear a message that's so clear and so meaningful, and you're there. And so I think podcasting is so powerful because also they can listen to you anywhere. Like, if you're a
That's true.
video,
Yes, I
if you're a
like that too.
video, like, they can't listen to you while driving because they get in an accident, right? So I have some of our listeners have tagged me while they were driving. Some of our listeners have tagged me while they were on a plane, while they were on a family trip having breakfast, And these are activities, we're like a companion to them, even if they were working. In
Mhm.
fact, I met one of our listeners who said, "Oh, are you Matthew from the Grody podcast?" And I said, "This is in Batangas. It's like 2 provinces away from Quezon City." And I said, "Oh, yeah, are you listening
Yeah.
to us?" "Yeah, I always listen to you while I'm working." And I said, "That's wonderful."
Wow.
Because in work, you can't work on a data sheet while watching a YouTube video, but you can listen to
That's
a
totally true.
podcast.
I love it. I love it. I think the word that jumped up to me when you say you're like their
Right,
companion, right? This is like there is a journey they're on, and what you're offering them is adding value to their journey, right? I love it. And then you talked I mean, I remember as we were preparing for this talk, you told us about the the rawness and honesty of that comes through typically in a podcast versus a video that just sometimes just wants to entertain. And yeah, so I that's something really very helpful as you think about it. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
So, well, I maybe share with us some of the some of the topics that you have covered. I think I remember you sharing that if you want to grow, you have to talk about the difficult stuff, right? What has been some of the difficult stuff that you have to tackle in some of your
Oh,
podcasts?
I remember one time that we talked about finding contentment in less,
Mm,
contentment and not not riding on the materialistic bandwagon. I can't remember the exact episode title, but that episode, I think in its second week, it reached more than 2,500 listens from people. And
wow,
that was the one of
wow.
the episodes that we really resonated in a very, very materialistic, bombarded, especially on social
Mm,
media. And I feel like it ministered to a lot of people in a sense that they were encouraged to look for the good in what they have and not stop comparing themselves
yeah,
to what other people on social
yeah.
media have. And then another one is an episode about disappointments and languish. Languish, it's a new
Mm,
term. Um, it was popularized because many people had gone through a difficult time during the pandemic. And we talked about that feeling of
mm-hmm,
languish, especially in your early adult to mid adulthood, where you feel like everything is just dull. And I think
mm,
uh, we're kind of not really battling the toxic positivity, but we're not really after countering anything, but we just want to be honest. We want to be honest about how we feel. We want to be honest about how
wow.
you, even if you are journeying and some of the things in your life are good, there are a lot of things in your life that are also not going well, and you can be honest about that. And that's
Mm-hmm,
that's the conviction actually, that growth starts whenever you you also start becoming more honest about what you're going through. Um, it's
yeah.
not about just smile and be happy because it's all about happiness, bro. It's not like that. Happiness is accepting the good
Mm-hmm,
and the bad and finding that the bad can work for good, especially in the hands of God. And that's where our listeners also
mm-hmm.
tell us that they were so blessed. We receive messages on Instagram and on Facebook telling us, thank you so much for talking about this. I feel like we should talk about this more. And because of your episode, it's either one person told us, I started going to church again. Uh, I realized this
Mm,
about my journey with God. One person told us that she realized that she really wasn't taking God seriously. And so she was gonna take God seriously
mm,
now. And to us, that was like, yo, that's so much a blessing. And we don't even know these people. Um,
wow.
the
Yeah.
reality is we're reaching people that we don't even know. We can't even reach them face to face, but it's such a blessing. It's such a
Mm-hmm,
blessing to just to
mm,
be able to see how
wow.
the podcast
It's
has
so,
affected them positively.
I appreciate you telling those stories. I mean, they're all, very important ways of God just kind of affirming what you are doing and trusting God to do. And, you're significantly actually, adding value to their discipleship journey, offering perspective and, in so many ways. What are some other milestones in your journey as you see the Lord work through Grow Deep?
Well, aside from just having the stats surprise us all the time, um, I think it's also having more opportunities to speak truth, open up. Because we got an email one time that told me exactly that, hey, we would like to invite you to speak to our camp, our youth camp. We've been listeners of your
Mm-hmm.
podcast and we would love to have you in our youth camp. And I'm
Mm.
like, yo, who are you? And they just we don't even know each other. and, um, and not just that, we've been invited to also tell our story in some of missional conferences here in the Philippines, because there are organizations in the Philippines who are starting to recognize that podcasting is a platform where we could really reach people deeply, not shallow, like not the marketing type evangelism, but really the journeying type of evangelism, which is, I think, the best model, because um, that's what podcasting really is. And so we've been able to share stories. We've been able to also share the strategy of Grow Deep, the values behind our podcast. And it's amazing how I
Mm.
think God is still going to open windows for us. And it's such an honor and a privilege. We're humbled by that. That as small as we are, we can be a reasonable voice. We don't want to be a big voice, really. We just want to be a reasonable voice that tells people, hey, media and digital ministry
Yeah.
is really a legit platform for reaching those whom Jesus also loves. And if you want to
Mm-hmm.
know about it, we
Hmm.
can tell you our story. And that's just it.
So you've inspired other people too, and those that are considering what they can do, and you've come alongside and helped them succeed as well.
I've,
Yeah.
I've, I've actually talked to a lot of pastors who approached me and told me, hey, I listened to your podcast and whatever for. Like, my podcast is not for you. Because, they're pastors. And I tell them, they tell me, like, I like your perspective when it comes to the word of God, you know. And I just take from
That's
that,
great.
and how you also talk about topics that are difficult to talk about in the church. And so I've become
Mm.
kind of a consultant for pastors who would like to start a more conversational approach in how they share the gospel, and not really do away
Yeah.
with, but add that, because when you talk about the gospel nowadays, it's either you're too preachy or you're too conversationalist, right? And I
That's
think
right.
we
Yeah.
need a mix of that, and that's where I believe the Lord has allowed me to be where we are in the podcast. And so some pastors have asked me, "Oh, we also want
Hmm.
to start a podcast for a church, but just for our members, right?" And that's totally fine, right? If you want to start a
Yeah.
podcast for your members,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I just tell them, this is the best way for you to talk about stuff, um, in your podcast. Don't do it like the church sermon, you know, because people need to know that their leaders in church are human as well. People need to hear you share
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
unguarded, unedited thoughts, and you processing it as a pastor.
Mm.
Not just pastors, but also leaders.
Yeah.
And that really resonates
Mm.
with a lot of the new generation coming up. They're not looking for the preachy type. They want to pick your brain as a leader. They they want to
I
test
like
you.
that. I like that a lot.
And
Yeah.
I love that as
Yeah.
well, because I think Jesus was like that. You know, when he was spending time with his disciples, Jesus wasn't preachy. He was allowing them to pick his brains out, and that that was how he changed his life. And I believe that if
Yeah.
leaders want to do the same, podcasting is a good platform for them to be seen as human as well.
I love it. I love it. Yeah,
Love
this
that.
is this
Yeah.
is all so cool stuff. I trust that those of you who are listening and you're considering what might this look like, some of the principles that Matthew has shared is golden, right? In reminding us that sometimes we curate it too much. We try to present it too beautifully, but the podcast is raw. It's a conversation. You're inviting people on a journey. We'd love to hear, Matthew, how have you grown? How have you grown deep as God has called you to this? And I know that other things that you do in life, but specifically, how has this experience influenced your walk with the
Oh,
Lord?
thank you for I would say that this podcast has really become a blessing to me personally, because I've learned how deep, how wide, how long the love of Jesus is really, not just for me, but through me. As a theology graduate, um, as a holder of a bachelor's in theology, I used to be a very dogmatic person, you know. Not because seminaries are teaching people that way, but that's just how I got it, you know. I want to be honest about that. But
Mhm.
engaging with our listeners has been so meaningful in that it taught me to love each person of every walk and believe that whatever walk this person is having right now, God is alongside them, just waiting for that moment for them to notice Him, you know. And I've learned how to be a companion to our listeners, to not judge them, and just to look for
Mm,
God's hand immediately instead of trying to give them an answer from the
mm,
Bible, you know. Um, and I've always I learned how to listen more. Uh, that's ironic actually because podcasting is about speaking. But really, I've learned how to listen more to our listeners. Whenever they message us, thank you. Whenever they send us these long messages, like you wouldn't even believe how long the messages are. I've learned how to love people just as God loves them. And not just in the podcast, but in real
wow.
life as well. So I praise God for this
Hmm.
opportunity, really.
Yeah, I
Wow.
like what you shared about, yeah, even me hearing you share about that of like learning how to be a companion for our listeners, to learn to love each person on every walk. I think that's gold, really gold. And I'm reminded of um one of the principles that we are looking at. I mean that I'm also learning in terms of reaching out to people digitally, which is behind every screen is a person. Behind every person has a story, and every story matters to God. And that's really affirming of what you shared, Kuya Matt, of this principle. And I know that our listeners are also thinking about that, and probably they also have their own shares of rawness in their
Mm,
conversations with people that is also going to reach out to a lot of their target audiences as well. So, if there is one thing that you'd like to leave our listeners with, or those who are thinking about doing podcasting, or those who are, just simply being here, listening with us, just us being a companion to them as they sip their coffee or whatnot. So, what you would like to leave our listeners with?
I just want to say that digital missions is a frontier in our time today. And I want to share what I always tell myself. Okay. I always tell myself, Jesus promised if we go and make disciples, we can be assured that He will be with us. Okay. That's His promise. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, and behold, I will be with you always. And I believe that the behold there, I will be with you not just in locations, not just geographically, but also in the realm
mm,
which you are going. Right now, there's the digital realm, and I believe that that promise of Jesus being with us is also applied. We can also claim that when you have the intention to start a digital ministry. And believe it or not, I always tell myself that, oh, can I talk about this episode and segue it into the gospel? I always tell myself, Jesus promised He will be with
mm,
me. Can I talk about this sensitive topic because the churches don't want to talk about this? I always tell myself, Jesus will be with me. And so if you want to start a podcast, if you want to start, video creation, if you want to start any form of digital ministry, tell yourself the same thing because it's exactly the promise that has been promised to us. We can claim that. And I just hope that resonates with our listeners right now and they would claim that and that they would let that promise overcome their fear and they would just step out in faith.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Great
love that.
words.
Yeah, so amazing. And where can our listeners find you if they want to listen to Grow Deep podcasts?
Oh, you can follow our podcast. We're on Spotify. Our logo is an orange logo. You can't miss it. It says Grow Deep. So search for Grow Deep podcast on Spotify. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. It's @ Grow Deep podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.
All right. So thank you so much, Kuya Matt. And
Thank you.
so,
Yeah.
so for our listeners, if you guys grabbed an idea or did something We'd love to hear your stories as well. And also, if you want to ask more questions for Kuya Matt here, you can search for Grow Deep on Facebook, Instagram, and send them a message. So, our line is also open for you. You can email us at coffeetalks@indigitus.org. And we get excited about all the different ways you do missions, especially in this generation or in the digital frontier. And we want to join you right where you are.
Well, thank you for joining us. See you next time on Coffee Talks. Bye for now. Thank you,
Bye for
Matt.
now. Thanks, Kuya Matt.
Thanks for joining us. You can find more Coffee Talks wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this content, follow Indigitus on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll see you there.